Climate Chamber mission sessions with so much insight and inspiration. I'm your host, Claire English, back again. We're delighted you're joining us from Glasgow by screen or in person. We've got some people here with us too. We met so many absolutely fascinating, creative people yesterday, and we promise we're not letting up today. We've got some folks, though, to thank, first of all, for getting us to this point, because they basically made this possible. We have the Chamber Climate Mission coming to you from this beautiful state-of-the-art City College in the campus in the heart of Glasgow. We also have to thank the Scottish Government, Scottish Leather Group, the City of Glasgow College, as I said, Edrington, Scottish Water, and the British Chambers of Commerce. That's my work done, because we really do need to thank them, because, as I said, we couldn't have done it without them, and this is day 2. We're keen to maintain your energy levels and keep you focused on our buzzy old agenda today, and that might be quite tricky for some who took us up on the visit to the Edrington HQ last night. I don't know how many people here did that, but some of us were merely there in spirit. Pardon the pun. If you were able to dine out last night in the city centre, and I hope you were, I hope you benefited from the Plate Up for Glasgow initiative in our restaurants. That's pretty amazing. Who knows, but you might have managed to fit in some B2B meetings too. But if you can't do that during the mission, and I totally understand because it is chock-a-block, we can help you to schedule something a little later at a date of your choosing. And by the way, there is a delegates list. You will find that in your programme, and I'm reaching for this thing again. This QR code, I say beer mat, most people would say drinks mat, but you can use that to find out all the information you need and all the contacts that you need. You can say hi to us on social media as well, send your questions and comments to us when we have our panels lined up and talk about the most pressing issues and solutions. We'd like your feedback and input. Tweet at Glasgow_chamber, hashtag Climate Chamber Mission. Goodness me, I'm having trouble, and I didn't even go to Edrington's last night. Plus, chat to us via the Hop-In platform that you've been accessing to use for the sessions too. Before I go any further, I just want to check that everyone's okay about being filmed if you are here with us in Glasgow, because that's something that we want to get your consent for, and if there's any problem, please make your opinion known to a member of our staff, and we'll do what we can to avoid filming. Right, well, as you might expect, it's a very busy schedule, but we're certain there's plenty to interest you. What are we focusing on? Well, you'll find out in a second, but we're looking at ambitious targets being set globally, what role countries and cities can play, and how they create the enabling conditions and behavioural change to deliver. In other words, what more can be done to support this on-the-ground activity? First up, we're going to hear from a fascinating guy, Seth M. Siegel, the Chief Sustainability Officer for NDRIP. Seth is, well, there's no other word for it, he's a real polymath. He's a writer, lawyer, activist, and serial entrepreneur. He's the author of the award-winning, critically acclaimed New York Times bestseller, Let There Be Water, Israel's Solution for a Water-Starved World. Even more credentials than that, he's a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, and he has spoken at the US Congress, United Nations, the World Bank, Davos, and at Google's headquarters. You get the idea. There could be more on that CV. Yes, there could. He's the co-founder of several companies, including Beanstalk, the world's leading trade brand extension company, which he sold to Ford Motor Company. And yes, there is more. He's also a producer of the Tony Award-nominated Broadway revival of Man of La Mancha. Seth, early or late for him, it's over to Seth right now in New York.
Hi, good morning to everyone there. It's my apology to all of you that I'm not live and in person with you, or at least, if not in person, live via video. But because of the time zone difference and because of all the restrictions on travel, I'm unfortunately way back in the United States, probably at this moment, still sleeping in my bed. So my apologies. However, if anybody would like to reach out to me, I really love the dialogue. This is my life talking about sustainability and water issues in particular. You can reach me one of two ways at Seth, S-E-T-H, at NDRIP, N like letter Norman, NDRIP.com, or via my website at www.sethm, don't forget the M for Mary, Siegel, SIEGEL.com. I'll also share that at the very end, so if you didn't write it down now, just be ready. It's also a way to keep you paying attention. Okay, so the topic at hand is the pace of change and what it all means for sustainability. And I have always been a centrist, moderate type of person, so I have to confess to some bias here in answering this question. But what I have seen in my work, what I have seen in my experience as a citizen, is that panic and alarm generally leads to polarization, but not to concrete results. And that lofty goals are good, they're important, they're inspiring, but they rarely lead to systemic change. And it is those systemic changes that we need, whether it's for the environment or addressing, frankly, just about any other social, economic, or other national security type issue. We need that systemic change. We need the buy-in from the largest number of people possible. And therefore, slow and steady as she goes is, I believe, the best way to go in all types of major changes. Hysteria, screaming, concern, they're all worthwhile, they're all meaningful. I don't ever question anyone's motives, but what I do say is that it's not helpful to getting the results that we want. My area of expertise is actually not climate change itself, it's not carbon directly, but it is water. I've written a few books about water, Let There Be Water, and also a book called Troubled Water. And Let There Be Water in particular may be relevant to what we want to talk about today. Let There Be Water takes as a case study what Israel has done. Now, I'm an American. I've been a visitor to Israel to do research for my book and otherwise. But what we found in Israel, which is in the driest region in the world, and which has a fast-growing population, a dynamic economy, and a place that has been savaged by climate change, about a third less water today than 25 years ago, that nonetheless, the country is similar in terms of water capability and water availability to Glasgow or London. And that is because of the fact that, many years ago, at least 100 years ago, they started thinking about it and worrying about it. And certainly for about 70 years now, they have been working towards solutions to give what they hoped would be a robust population, turned out to be true, all the water that they could possibly need. They have in Israel the highest level of wastewater reuse in the world, over 85%. Desalination provides water for about 80% of the household water consumed in Israel. They have superbly rethought agriculture, what crops to grow, how to grow them, what technologies to use. They've used market forces to get real world pricing into the water equation. They use governance galore, and they use lots and lots and lots and lots, if I didn't say it yet, lots of technology. They have concluded that technology is in the long term, the cheapest and best way to solve grave problems. And I think that from what I learned from writing Let There Be Water, Israel's solution for a water-starved world, that we learned from that what could be a model for the world at large. Now, water scarcity and climate change are actually inextricably tied to each other. To some extent, this is not my words, I'm quoting somebody. Someone said that what climate change really is either too much water, flooding, or too little water, drought. Now, obviously, climate change is more than just that, but there are nonetheless a great variety of things that we can do to fix the front edge of climate change, and that is the flooding, and that is the drought. Now, I'd like to address what I think is something that we could be all working forward on. Everyone who cares about sustainability, everybody who cares about making supply chains more durable, safer, and more certain for companies. And what we can be focusing on is how we grow our food and fiber all over the world. Now, I'm going to share some statistics that I think will surprise you, but they are valid and true. And if anybody wants me to give you sourcing for this, I have it in spades. So catch this. Around the world today, there are about 600 million acres that are irrigated by something called flood irrigation. Now, flood irrigation is akin to a method used about 5,000 years ago and continuously since those 5,000 years, whether in Egypt with the Nile or in Mesopotamia, which is now Iraq, with the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. And what that process was to take water from the rivers, prepare channels of a sort, canals of another sort, and flood the fields, and then let them dry out, and then reflood them, and let them dry out, and reflood them. Now, in a time 5,000 years ago, when there were not a lot of technological choices, and a time 5,000 years ago, when there weren't a lot of people, there's a lot of water, There was no real serious export industries. That may possibly have been the right way to grow civilization. But today it turns out that those flood irrigated acres represent 85% of all irrigated fields everywhere. So there are other technologies, but those only represent about 15%. Sprinklers and pressurized drip irrigation is only in total about 15%. Sprinklers are about 12%, and pressurized drip is about 3%. Now, with 85% of farmland being irrigated, irrigated farmland being using flood irrigation, why is that a problem? It's a problem because of the insane, unsustainable, endless wastefulness of this process. And worse is that in very dry places all around the world, northern China, throughout Egypt, throughout the Middle East, throughout the United States, the Southwest, flood irrigation is still the dominant technology or method of choice. In Arizona, which is primarily a desert, 89% of all irrigation is done with flood irrigation. Now, what happens when you flood irrigate versus a new technology, a company that I decided to join because I was so excited by the technology, but I didn't decide to join it because I was looking for a job, quite the opposite. I learned about this technology after I'd finished one of my books, and I was thinking of writing a book about it, and then I decided instead to become an investor in it, so I want to disclose that for full transparency. And then, becoming excited and ever more excited about the technology, decided that boy, oh boy, would I love to help this company achieve its goals even faster. And that's why this past April, I became Chief Sustainability Officer at NDRIP, which although my email address is N-no-hyphen-drip, the company is spelled N-drip, like new drip. What this technology does is really hard to imagine. It saves between 50 and 70% of the water that was previously used by a flood irrigated field, and yet you can easily and very inexpensively convert that flood irrigated field to an NDRIP irrigated field, and in so doing, it's spending only a few $100s per acre, you save between 50 and 70% of the water. Now wait, it doesn't stop there. The farmer, because of when the farmer is flood irrigating, it stresses the plant. There's either too much water or too little water, most of the time. And so with NDRIP, guess what happens? The plant gets a steady flow of drip irrigation, non-pressurized, fed only by gravity. So there's no carbon implication to the negative. In fact, you'll hear in a second, quite the opposite. Big carbon implication to the positive. But the steady drip of droplets of water on the roots leads to calm, healthy plants, and yields routinely increase by between 15 and 45%. So you save half or more of the water, you increase the yield, but it doesn't end there. The largest economic input for all farmers is fertilizer. And yet, by using NDRIP, what you end up having is that you use about a third less chemicals and about 25% less fertilizer, and also between 60 and 70% less carbon emissions than a flood irrigated field. Now, this is really something very special. I've seen it. It's on hundreds of fields. It's on thousands of acres around the world. We have a strategic partnership with PepsiCo that you could learn more about by contacting me or by going online. And this is a technology that every company everywhere can make use of to increase the potentiality and the sustainability of their supply chain while making their farmers wealthier or giving them more assets because of the higher yield, better quality crops. This is a win all the way around. There's not a bad bone in this whole process. It's a win, 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 and win. If any of you would like to learn more about this, again, I'm sorry I won't be here for the live Q&A. If any of you would like to learn more about this, please, again, contact me at seth@ndrip.com or go to my website at www.sethm, like Mary, Siegel, S-I-E-G-E-L, sethmsiegel.com. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure being with you, and I hope next year or next time we get to do this all live and in person.
They got the energy there. What a good communicator he is. We're going to move on now to the Managing Director of UK Energy Institute Singapore. He is Peter Godfrey. He's based in Singapore, the Chief Representative of the Energy Institute in the Asia-Pacific region. In addition to his role with the EI, Peter has also worked as an independent advisor, consultant and executive coach to a number of organisations and government agencies on issues related to the energy sector development within the context of the energy transition and decarbonisation and their strategic implications. I really am going to probably have some coffee after this, I can tell you. Peter is also actively involved in activities related to promoting the need for and accelerating the development of carbon capture and storage projects, the development of the hydrogen economy, and the decarbonisation of the hydrocarbon refining and petrochemical sectors. There is a lot more, but we want you to hear from the man himself, so here's Peter.
Hello there. Firstly, let me start by giving my thanks to the Glasgow Chamber for hosting the climate mission, which is, I believe, the largest ever international trade mission hosted by the British Chambers of Commerce. It has specifically been designed to support businesses in the delivery of the circular economy solutions, sustainability and climate targets, and I hope to touch on all these topics in my short presentation today. Permit me to start my presentation today by setting the scene for my thoughts through the lens of a piece of Singapore history, a place that I have made home for over a decade and from where I'm speaking today. Singapore's water journey during the past 50+ years is an outstanding example of how, despite multiple hardships along the way, a clear vision, pragmatic policies, together with political will and long-term planning based on forward-looking strategy, plus a relentless urge to continuously improve, can result in strong foundations for a truly sustainable development. The droughts here in Singapore in 1885, 1895 and 1902 put such severe pressure on water stocks here that the municipal authorities restricted the water supply to as little as 2 hours a day. After the Japanese occupation during the Second World War, Singapore faced another water crisis as its economy started to develop and consumption rose beyond the capacity of existing water resources by 1946, and reliance on imported water from Malaysia remains somewhat insecure as a means of providing water thereafter. Water demand in Singapore is currently around 430 million gallons a day, which is equivalent to around 782 Olympic-sized swimming pools, with homes consuming 45% and the domestic sector around the rest. But by 2060, Singapore's total water demand could almost double, with non-domestic sector accounting for around 70% of that utilization as industries grow and the economy grows as fast as it can. By then, so-called new water, which is actually produced from recycled water, and desalination will meet up to 85% of Singapore's future water demand. Today, Singapore is internationally recognized as a model city for integrated water management and an emerging global hydro hub, a leading center for business opportunities and expertise in water technologies. Now, Singapore's holistic approach to water management can be distilled into 3 fundamental policies and strategies. Number 1, collect every drop of water we possibly can through catchment and catchment areas. 2, reutilize water endlessly as much as possible. And 3, utilize modern technologies such as seawater desalination for the rest. This brings me to what I believe represents an important topic, which is around the concept of resource efficiency. Today, when we start talking about carbon and decarbonisation and GHG emissions, we tend to focus entirely on energy utilisation. But what we don't bring to the surface is that it's not only the energy production that matters, but the way energy is utilized. Today, 73.2% of GHG emissions can be directly attributed to energy. But if we look at this graph and we look at energy use, buildings, transport, industries, particularly steel, which represents around 7.4 iron and steel itself % of those GHG emissions, we recognize that resources and the use of resources represent a fundamentally important part of that mix. So as we move forwards, we shouldn't only be thinking about energy efficiency, energy management, decarbonization from an energy efficiency perspective, but our resources and how we utilize them. And within that context, we need to look at not only the issue of fossil fuels, but the issue of metals and metal refining, the issues of non-metallic minerals, the way we utilize our land, and indeed the way we utilize our wood, our crops, and the feedstocks that depend on them. And in addition, obviously, to water that I've mentioned within a Singaporean context. This being said, what are we trying to do? And what are we fundamentally trying to do in the energy transition? What we're trying to do is to create an economy that effectively decouples the use of resources from economic well-being and economic wealth going forwards, economic activity on this graph. What we want to do is to minimize our resource utilization as much as possible, but create as much value by using less as we possibly can. Now, this is a bit of a magic trick, but at the end of the day, we can make the first steps to make this happen relatively easily. And it is that I wanted to really talk about. But before doing so, let me raise one other issue that is also terribly important. And within COP language, we often call this the issue of just transition. The need to recognize that actually if we look at carbon emissions, if we look at resource utilization, we can see that actually the world is not even. Today, although we use and utilize around 100 billion tons of extraction a year, that's about 13 tons of material per person per year on this planet, we also need to recognize that actually 80% of those resources are consumed by just 15% of the global population. And therefore, there is no solution to the problem without recognizing that we need to equalize things out and create a more just transition at the same time as we begin to start changing the models that we are working within. This is a terribly important point that is often missed when we're looking at the issue of carbon in isolation from the issue of resources and resource utilization. Now, within that context, we should also recognize that extractive resources themselves and the extractive resource industry, so that's not just oil, gas, coal, but everything that we take out of the ground, extract, utilize, and never return it back into the ground, represents over 50% of our CO2 emissions themselves. It is therefore essential that if we are to live in a world of resource efficiency, where we don't allow the extractive industries to earn as much money as they possibly can from the molecules they extract without making them fundamentally responsible for the efficient use of those resources downstream by their customers and link the two together more effectively and efficiently than we do today. And this, of course, brings me on to the whole subject of the circular economy and the need to decouple resources and the way they are used from economic activity in the best ways we can do this. How do we actually change global mindsets to be shifted from awareness to action? What needs to be done to transform archaic, wasteful resource systems and markets into cleaner and more efficient supply chains going forwards? How do we make producers and extractors of resources more responsible for creating the more circular economy mechanisms and supply chains. What does that mean in terms of transformation? And how do we actually deal with these things from the point of view of looking at integrated technologies? I put these things together basically within the context of the circular economy principles that were stated by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which you see on this slide below. This is fundamentally what needs to be done. We need to find ways that will allow us to fundamentally re-engineer the way we look at our supply chains of the future. We need to create bold moves in order to move us from a linear to a circular economy. And we need to begin to fundamentally re-engineer the way we make, use and return the core resources we require throughout our lives and on this planet. To do this means that we have to design out waste and pollution, that's obvious. But at the same time, we need to re-engineer our supply chains to maximize use, functionality of products and processes, and utilize and where possible, regenerate natural systems where we possibly can. So from that perspective, we need to slowly but surely move into a world that begins to look at the whole value chain and encourage the localization of supply chains, the more efficient use of our resources through putting in mandatory processes that actually encourage the use of reusable resources in exchange from virgin resources, and at the same time use end of product policies to make sure that producers and extractors of resources and materials have more control and more responsibility of making sure that their raw materials and products are used in the most efficient way possible. That is my key message today. It takes us squarely and circularly back to where I started from, the Singapore water story, and the three fundamental principles that have underlined that story. In water terms, what Singapore did was to collect every drop of water possible. Number two, to reuse its water endlessly. And number three, to take long-term bets on integrated new technology solutions, such as in the case of water, seawater desalination, as Singapore has done so wisely. I'll leave it there. Thank you very much.
And thank you very much, Peter, in Singapore. Next to Dimitri Codrelier, who guides top companies in their transformation to become sustainable businesses. Dimitri is the CEO of Qantas, a leading sustainability consulting firm known for its science-driven approach for developing innovative sustainability strategies and solutions. Active in environmental sustainability since 2008, Dimitri specializes in sustainability strategy, innovation, and eco-design as well. He facilitates the sustainable packaging initiatives for cosmetics, Spice, a multi-stakeholder group co-founded by Qantas and L'Oreal, and that unites 25 cosmetics organizations to shape the future of sustainable packaging in the beauty industry. Let's hear from Dimitri now.
Hello, Dimitri Codrelier. I am the CEO of Qantas. I will take you a hint about Qantas in a few minutes. I was previously the manager of the French office in Paris, and I'm super happy to be with you today.
Thank you, Dimitri. So over 1,000 companies making up 20% of global market capitalization have now set or committed to set a science-based target. Is this a reason to celebrate?
Yeah, so you are talking about commitment. At Qantas, we are 250 people, Qantisian, that are committed to align businesses with planetary boundaries. We are working in the US, we are working in Europe, and our goal is to influence, to explain, to commit companies toward this transition and to really drive the transformation with them. So speaking about commitment, is there a reason to celebrate the commitment? Over the last 5 years since the COP in Paris, we have seen a lot of companies that are looking toward their transition pathway over the next years. We have strong example in our clients with, for example, L'Oréal, that are committed to be aligned with planetary boundaries in 2030. We have, for example, Nestlé, which have said that they will invest more than 3 billion Swiss francs in the coming years in order to reduce their impact on climate. We have a cosmetics company in France, which is L'Occitane en Provence, that said at the last IUCN International Congress a few weeks ago that they will commit to be nature positive, taking into account climate and biodiversity. We have Danone, which is investing strongly in regenerative agriculture. You have Mars, you have Starbucks, you have a lot of companies that are committed to work on this transformation. But commitment is one part. Then there is really a need of transforming their business model.
So you talk about the need for business model transformation. How should companies approach this?
So commitment is clear, is absolutely needed. But then when you see the level of commitment that needs to be taken in order to be aligned with the issues we are facing on climate, on biodiversity, on all of these environmental issues, we are not speaking about incremental change. We are not speaking about a smooth transition. We are speaking about a real transformation of their business model. So I see 4 main points in order to transform businesses along this way. First, it's to be sure to have a buy-in of the key stakeholders in order to make it. Your shareholders, your investor, your board, your executive committee, your suppliers, your clients, all of them need to clearly understand why are you moving in these directions and what do you plan to do. Then you have to have this, what we call holistic view, meaning that in order to make it, you will need to embark each key department of your business. The talent one, the operation, the marketing, the supply chain, the way you are collaborating with your supplier needs to be rethink. Then the old way of doing where you were just fighting with your competitors needs to be refreshed, needs to be redesigned, and you need to find a way of collaborating. You need to find a way of having this, what we call pre-competitive initiative, where you are working with your competitors in order to make it. And last, it's the link that you need to have with legislation. You can try to use your influence to speed up the legislations that needs to happen on that. But if we have a look of all of this key change, and there are others, it's a matter of human. It's a matter of women and men that are leading organizations. And I think this soft power of human in order to make this transition will be absolutely key.
What challenges can we identify regarding the leap from bold climate commitment to action?
So it's true. Along the way of your commitment, with all of the actions we have trying to face just before, there are some bottlenecks, there are some barriers. It's not like sailing in a very nice river. It's gonna be complicated. You will have to face, and you are already facing different type of challenges. The first one, I think it's just to have a look to this issue by trying to do this incremental statement I was phrasing before, and you don't scale what you are doing. From innovation, you need to define prototype, and you need to scale the change that you want to see on your full business model, on your full value chain. Then there is a matter of the way you act. It's great to act or to pose some actions for the next years, but you need to act now. You need to act with a short-term thinking, meaning I need to see what I'm gonna do in 2022 and 2023. But the short-term thinking need to be a little bit different from your investor, from the board members, from the shareholders. Obviously, they need to see that as a plan to change for the coming years. So you need to act fast, but you need to ask your key stakeholders to look to your business for the next year. And then I think there is a lot which is linked to this, I would say, soft power. You need to change the way you are doing your leadership. You need to take courageous decisions. You need to speak about the elephant in the room that you can see on your way to move forward. Then we're phrasing also about your shareholders. You need to embark them, meaning that they need to understand why are you doing that? What is the risk that they have not to do that? What is the license to operate that you have along the way with all of this change? And then there is also a topic about your people. How can you organize a change management system with all of your people? The young generations that you are recruiting now are asking a lot about the change, and you need to have them to speed up your transformation and not crystallize the debate between the young generation and people that are maybe not so comfortable with all of these sustainability topics. So you definitely need to see how you can empower the young generation, how you can organize these change management practices in order to make it.
So what kind of transformations companies need to do to move forward?
I think first, there is a matter of acknowledgement, meaning when you look to the commitment that are needed on those topics, either you said, I need to do that for 2030, 2040, 2050, and I will be there, and that's okay. Either you acknowledge clearly that the actions you are taking is not about a small transition again. So there is really a matter of acknowledging the level of change that is needed. And the clock on sustainability and on all of these climate issues is ticking. We don't have time to waste. We cannot waste. The last report from IPCC was absolutely clear on that. And we have decided at Quentis to launch a project which is called Generation Glasgow. And the idea of this project toward this COP26 was to interview our key CEO, our key client CEO. What do they think about this transition? What do they think about this transformation? And about the bottleneck, about the barriers, about the main challenges they see along the way. No media, no communication team on this discussion and interview. So I had a chance to meet all of them. And the idea is really to see where do they see the main challenges. And the goal of this project, Generation Glasgow, is to take from them and to work with a collective of people of courageous leadership that they could have internally to find proposal, to find new way of thinking, to find new way of doing in order to solve all of these issues that they will have faced. So we are really delighted to launch that. We have done all of this discussion and interview with CEOs, and now we are moving to increase this community and to work on clear proposal toward 2022.
Thank you, Dimitri. So to conclude, what would be your 3 takeaways for us today?
I think the first one will be that we can see on the society, with our clients, with a lot of stakeholders, that they see the challenge as like mission impossible. It's too complicated. It's too hard. We will not make it. The wall is there. We don't. And I think this type of behavior is critical, because when we speak about this type of transformation, and I was telling that it's human transformation, it's a structural transformation, I think there is a strong need of being optimistic on that. Yes, you have to face the fact that it's a massive transformation, but if you do that negatively by being sure you won't achieve, I think it's one of the biggest mistakes you can do. So my first conclusion will be keep optimism, keep positivism on that in order to make it. Secondly, it's that we will need to find courageous leadership in order to make that. We need to celebrate courage in order to do that, because it's going to be not another challenge like digitalization was a few years ago. It's going to be one of the biggest challenge that companies will have to come over in the next decade, and that's going to be maybe the next decade will be the biggest challenge when you compare to the last century that those companies will endure. So it's going to be super key to be clear, authentic, and courageous in order in order to promote all of this action that needs to be taken now, starting in 2022. And thirdly, I think we need to reshape completely the economy. And at Quentis, we do believe that we are opening a new page in terms of the economic model that we are entering in. We had an economic model that were an economic model of the growth of the society of consumptions over the last century. Now we need to have a new economic model that take into account clearly the capacity, the boundary of the planet. And I do see that as a bunch of nice opportunities. I don't see that as something where we have to do something like in the history. And I think we have to admit the fact that we have in front of us this new economy where we need to tackle systemic challenge, where we need to have another type of empathy towards humanity, towards planets. And I think leaders that are in leading organization now have the massive opportunity to enter in the history, to clearly enter in the history, meaning that tomorrow it's not a success to say that you are going by X, that you are doing all of this profit margin and all of that. It's a condition, but we will celebrate success tomorrow by seeing who are the key leaders, who are the courageous leaders that are able to really transform their business in order to align them with the needs, with the capacity, with the boundaries of the planet.
Thank you very much, Dimitri. Finally, to Dr. Kurt Rice, Rector at the Norwegian University of Life Sciences. Kurt's been in post since August the 1st this year, so he's freshly minted. Prior to that, he was in the same position at Oslo Metropolitan University. He also served as Pro-Rector for Research at the University of Tromsø, where he had been on the academic staff since '93. And just for good measure, he's leading Norway's Committee for Gender Balance and Diversity in Research. Kurt's University of Life Sciences has a strong and pervasive focus on sustainability, ranging from sustainability issues related to climate and health to agriculture and the organization of cities and societies. Lots to listen to. Take it away, Kurt.
Thank you, and good morning, everybody. I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here at the Glasgow Chamber of Commerce, and I'd like to spend a few minutes trying to talk about bold climate goals and connect that to our discussion about the circular economy and especially the role of academia in this context. We've heard several examples about the circular economy the last few days, but I'd like to suggest that it's still something that really is for the rebels. I'll get back to why I say that in a minute. Everybody who's here this week knows that there are no quick fixes to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. It's a very slow chain of events, some growing human crisis, human needs, political incentives, research, innovation, investment, and so on. At first, things move kind of slowly. As an example of that, one of the most prominent Norwegian environmental activists, Fredrik Hauge, said recently that at COP15 in Copenhagen, there were probably about 5 Teslas driving around Europe. And that's only 11 years ago. But at some point, things start to speed up, and the direction of politics changes and investments increase. In the case of renewable energy, this happens not just for the sake of the planet, but also because that's where the real revenues are. We see it in Europe now, where the offshore wind power race is on for real. Now, As I said earlier, circular economy is still kind of a thing for rebels, and I'm not the rebel in this context, but as the head of a university, I meet them every day. Students have a strong sense of urgency. They're trying to understand and change the future. They're trying to figure out what's expected of them, how they can contribute to the green transformation, how they can make their studies more relevant, and maybe most importantly, how they can push us on circularity. They really, really care about this. And we need that push. We need it when it comes to the circular economy. Right now, it really is a Sisyphean task. The Circularity Gap report from 2021 shows a 5% reduction in circularity in the global economy just from 2018. The boulder is sliding back down the hill. In Norway, only about 2% of the economy is circular. Nonetheless, in academia, there's an increasing trend towards circularity as a research focus in many fields. And some politicians, of course, start to understand this too, and that can all give us a little bit of hope, but the challenges remain clear. There are too few political incentives. Democratic leadership just isn't bold enough, and we're not doing enough research. The investment rate isn't growing quickly, and basic research seems very far removed from good business, so consumers don't get the chance to exercise the impact that they could. In short, there are too few first movers. Right now, most of them are gathered here in Glasgow, but overall, not enough of us dare to take the chances that we need to. Let me take the discussion about research just one little step further. There's a very important factor that just doesn't get enough consideration, and that is the serendipity of human discovery. We cannot force new knowledge. You know, if we could, we wouldn't be here today. The kind of paradigm-shifting, radical innovation that we need in so many fields takes slow and steady and patient and open-ended investment, because most of the time, we don't really know what we're looking for. We know why, and researchers see the big picture and the problems that need to be solved. Our work as scientists, nonetheless, is about the microscopic picture, trying to understand the natural world better, one little step at a time, sometimes almost accidentally seeing something that we connect to another problem or another approach. And that's why investment in research and innovation has to allow for freedom. That's actually the only way to make discoveries. I want this gas engine to be more efficient, you say. Yeah, well, maybe a research team can do that in a year or two, but if you say, I need a new energy source, then we need a lot more time and a lot more freedom. It was as long ago as 1876 that William Grills Adams discovered that selenium produces electricity when it's exposed to the rays of the sun. 1876. In 2017, the global capacity of solar power reached the 400 gigawatt milestone, and now is the fastest growing renewable technology in the world. But we don't have 140 years to try and to fail first. So we all need to become first movers. We need to sign on to the importance of research, understanding the serendipitous nature of knowledge production and discovery. Let me give you just one example that connects academia and industry. At the Norwegian University of Life Sciences, we have a Center for Research-Based Innovation that's called Earth Rescue. It's a center for the rescue of earth materials and wastes in the circular economy. You see, our society is producing excess earth materials and wastes at an ever-increasing rate. This is from mining, from road building, from construction projects. And right now, there's no sustainable way of handling excess materials and wastes that are available. We don't have good ways to store it, and really, it should be recycled, upcycled, reused in infrastructure instead of using virgin raw materials. So we need new innovations to strengthen the market for recycled raw materials. And the Earth Rescue Center is trying to do this. It'll create new technologies and an innovative environment through cooperation between municipalities and NGOs and citizen groups, and especially cooperation between academia and business. And right now we have more than 30 partners who have signed on to this. That's crucial. That's crucial because the path from research to implementation can be shorter when industry and academia work together. You in commercial industry have the skills that are essential to take our discoveries to market. Academia doesn't have that skill. It's not our job. It's not what we're good at. It's your job. So you have to help us get the next generation of rebels out there. And the earlier that business representatives come into the picture, the more time we save, the better we understand each other, the quicker we build a sustainable future. To wrap up, the driving question this morning is, why are bold climate targets not always the answer? And of course, we agree that the United Nations has to set bold targets, but we need to break them down into pieces that we can digest. And if we don't, we get overwhelmed and we can't see the small steps that constitute the long chain of events that lead to sustainable success in the end. In some ways, it's like research. We see the big goal, but the work is incremental. So we need the right balance, and the political goal should be bold because the political goal setting can't anticipate the serendipity of the process. But the answers that we need don't come from bold goals alone. The answers come from the microscopic work of figuring them out. Making those small steps into explicit political goals actually is a problem. Because goals that are too specific, they actually reduce our chance for solving global challenges. They undermine the serendipity of discovery, and they get in the way of the rebels. Thank you.
And thank you very much, Kurt. If you would like to come and sit beside me, round of applause. Because Kurt is here with us in Glasgow, but we're joined by Peter in Singapore. And Dimitri, where are you exactly? I don't know where you are, Dimitri. You're in France?
No, yeah, I am in France. I am in Brittany, actually.
In Brittany? Whereabouts? I'm very nosy. Whereabouts exactly in Brittany?
On the south of Brittany, close to the Gulf du Morbihan.
Very nice indeed.
Yeah,
well,
nice
thank you for joining us. I wish you guys were here in Glasgow as well. Fascinating stuff from all of you. But I wanted to start off with something general because you are in different countries of the world at the moment. And Kurt, of course, comes from Norway, although he had difficulties getting into Glasgow today, but he's come all the way from Norway. So let me start by asking you a little bit about how you see the key benefits for the country that you're in embracing a circular economy approach. Can I start with you, Peter, and how that applies to Singapore?
Hello, and greetings from Singapore to all. I'm echoing a little bit, so hopefully I can speak while I'm echoing, but I'll try my best. So what I would say about Singapore is that obviously, as per my presentation, within the concept of the circular economy and water, we have done a lot to realize that the circular economy can be built into a system, not only for resources such as water, but as Kurt just mentioned, with regard to every resource that we have on the earth. We have a requirement to actually create a different way of gaining responsibility for those resources. So right now, Singapore is trying to work on issues like green procurement policies to make sure that the products that we use here are more recyclable or more circular in nature. We're also beginning to start looking at, again, something that Kurt mentioned about the use of virgin products, ways that we can actually make recycled products more commercially viable than actually using virgin products. So what we're beginning to start looking at, I wouldn't say we have all the answers yet, but we're beginning to start looking at regulatory change that will encourage that circularity and will do what we need to do, which is to recognize, number one, we are trying to reallocate the largest amount of capital that has ever been reallocated in our world economy. And that actually requires a fundamental change in the way our economic systems and supply chains work.
Peter, thank you for that. Dimitri, same question to you.
I would say exactly the same. I think
speaking with our clients and speaking with companies for more than 15 years at Quintis, I can see how when we look about all of these challenges, we speak about climate today because it's COP, but obviously it's linked to water, it's linked to biodiversity, it's linked to all our resources. When we speak to that, and when we look to the reality of the capacity of the planet, and you just try to see what is the economic model that has been the economic model with the, I would say, the GDP over the last years, you can see how much there is a gap between the economic model of today and the economic model that will be needed, that will be imposed to us on the coming years. So when you speak with C-level, when you speak with board, when you speak with executive committee, in order to show them the reality of what science says on that, and how they were operating or how we are operating globally. Now, the level of transformation that we are speaking about is massive. So obviously, we need to embark the full value chain. Obviously, you need to embark all stakeholders. Obviously, we need to have another way of doing with your clients, of trying to incentivize your clients, your consumer about all of that. You need to work on the upstream, you need to work on the downstream in order to be sure that your packaging, your product is fully recycling if you are a consumer good. So everything needs to be reestablished. It's a massive opportunities, obviously, but in the meantime, it can be a little bit scary for them. So the goal that we have at this, and we are many players doing the same, it's just to try to show the fact that yes, it's a massive transformation, but going step by step, you can do it even if you are a worldwide player that has operating with one ring over the last year.
Are you optimistic? Yeah, sorry, I'm going to bring Kurt in here. You're saying yes to that, but sorry, go on.
There's something very special about the Norwegian economy in the last 50 years, and that's that it's been based on the export of oil and gas. Mm-hmm. So the demand to find an alternative structure for the Norwegian economy is massive. And on the one hand, we continue to export oil and gas. We know we need to stop doing that, and are trying to do it in ways trying to use some of those resources in ways that can help, for example, with providing facilities for carbon capture opportunities and so on. But the Norwegian economy really faces a massively demanding situation connected to circularity as a way to, among other things, get out of the oil business.
How optimistic are you that there is the political will and the will amongst the population, Scandinavian population, that this is something that must be sorted now? We're sitting COPs happening around us. Right. We're here today. Absolutely. Is there a sense of urgency? And we've been saying this for years, but is there a real sense of urgency? Things have to change. Is that grabbed people yet?
So I think that there is some basis for optimism in the Norwegian context. So we have made a commitment to stop looking in certain areas for oil, even though it's highly likely that there's oil there. We just had a national election a few weeks ago, and the environment and the approach to dealing with oil and natural gas was absolutely the central issue there. So there's a very strong level of engagement. There's a strong political will to do something different about it. And of course, there's some differences in thinking about exactly how that should happen.
Absolutely. Well, part of the title of this talk is Pathways to Greater Sustainability. Why are bold climate targets not always the answer? And you kind of addressed some of that in your talk as well. Can I throw that to you, Peter? It can be misleading to have these climate targets, and maybe it's not a great idea either, because anyone can set a target, can't they?
Well, I'm not sure it's misleading, but I think what we're tending to do is to think of climate in isolation to the bolder and broader economic issue. At the end of the day, we are trying to change the whole way we do business. And we have to recognize, let's take the Norwegian oil and gas sector, or any other oil and gas sector for that matter, all of them have been based on supply chains that were created 150 years ago. And the fact is that what we're trying to do is to reinvent those supply chains to create more local, more integrated, modern technology ways of solving the problems. Now, I think the first thing that COP26 ought to be doing within this respect is recognizing that actually climate goals is part of changing the whole of the macroeconomic system. And that rather like giving up smoking, we actually have to put the right regulations in place to start that process. We can't do it overnight, we know that. But at the end of the day, we can do certain things, like, for example, making miners, making extractors of oil and gas responsible for the efficient use of the molecules that they are actually taking out of the ground. At the moment, they are maximizing their profits by how many molecules they can produce. It doesn't take much for regulators to agree that these fundamental building blocks need to happen if we genuinely want to change the economic model of tomorrow.
Why is that not happening? What are the barriers to that happening, Peter?
Well, to me, I think there are three areas that we need to think about within that context. Firstly, everybody needs to recognize that if we are going to reallocate capital, we need capital, and that means growth. So at the end of the day, everybody needs to make money within the new system. So again, we can't move too quickly. The second thing we need to do is to agree that actually we need some form of inclusion, back to this concept of a just transition. And then the third thing is sustainability, in that obviously we can't create a sustainable future without growth or inclusion included. So those three things are all fighting against each other instead of aligning and having that conversation. So that's the first thing. The second thing I think we're trying to do is we're not recognizing that we can't solve the world's problems overnight. We need to work on specific supply chains, specific industries, specific sectors, develop the right regulatory policing systems to make this happen, and then get on with it. Those are missing today. So we need a sectoral approach, and we need a vision that actually brings international communities together, taking account of the innovation that we just talked about and the sustainability that Dimitri just talked about, and put all of those things together within the context of a sector change framework.
One of the drivers in that kind of development is something that's part of my daily life, namely students. We have really smart young people wanting to take an education to be an engineer or to work in some other way that traditionally has been in one of those supply chains that was just mentioned. And now they say, you know, I don't want to work for a company that isn't deeply committed to making things different. And it becomes not just an altruistic decision on the part of an industry to make those changes. It becomes a matter of life and death, because they can't recruit the talent that they need if they aren't showing that potential talent, the commitment that they have to change.
Let me ask you about that, Dimitri, because you were talking about leadership and soft skills and things like that. So that is a problem, isn't it? Trying to get people to sort things out and go into industries that they don't really like. They're holding their nose with some of these industries and hating it.
Yeah. There is like 5 years ago, we were never discussing with any HR people. Like we were speaking with the sustainability department, we were speaking with the finance department, and now we are speaking with the human resource department, because it's their license to operate, to be sure that they have the greatest talent on board, and we have a lot of movement from this young community that are willing to work only on companies that are strongly committed, one, and that are taking clear actions on that. So it's no a matter of the brand, the employee brand of our clients to be able to work on that. And just I think the key point about all of this commitment, a lot of commitment, I was saying that just before, but a lot of commitment has been taken since the COP 21 in Paris. We can see that I can really see that our clients, the executive committee, the board are understood that they need to take this commitment for 2030, 2040. We can discuss if it's too long. Yes, sometimes 2050 is too long, but they are committed to do something. When they are putting that in actions and when they are looking to what needs to be done, it's there that we can see the bottleneck and the barriers, because some of them still see that as one of the issues they need to tackle, like digital, like complex supply chain, like a new way of transporting the product, like so all of these trends that company needs to work on. But this topic impose radical and courageous decisions, sometimes impose to speak about renouncement for some topic, clearly. And it's when they are in front of that we can see that the crystallization can exist internally.
I'm going to thank you, Dimitri. I'm going to see if any of our audience would like to ask a question today. Yes, there's somebody's hand going up straight away. I'm sorry you can't see them, Peter and Dimitri, but we can describe he's a very attractive man, and he's got a microphone, and he's going to tell us who he is, and he's going to address his question. Is it to anyone specifically, sir, or is it to everybody in the panel?
Well, firstly, so my name's Jay Mookie. I work for the global fintech Finastra. I look after their ESG strategy. And Claire, it's really about the question that you asked to Peter. Why isn't this happening yet? And for me, it's about prioritizing profit at the expense of planet, people, and prosperity. And really, what's needed is a shift from shareholder value to stakeholder value. And it's very clear what governments need to do in terms of regulate business to incentivize them to create stakeholder value. And I can't see a more straightforward solution than that. And I just wanted to get the opinion. I mean, we've got a representative here from Norway. They've made huge, vast sums from oil and gas exports, and their social services are very well funded, pensions are very well funded. I mean, how much money do countries and corporates need before we say enough is enough and let's prioritize planet, people, and prosperity for all?
Oh, great question. I'm going to start with you, Kurt, and then I'll work my way around the rest of you as well. So, Kurt, would you like to address that first?
I would, although I am hesitant to speak on behalf of Norway, but...
But I think you should.
After I mentioned that we had an election just a few weeks ago, and I can't remember if it was the day before or the day after the election, but the front page of one of the Danish newspapers said, "Dear Norway, all that money that you've shoved into your fund here, if you can't achieve a green transformation, if you can't achieve a change to a circular economy, how do you think anybody else can?" And that made a really powerful impact in Norway and got a lot of discussion and helped start to make a push of exactly the kind that you're describing there. So I think that external pressure is necessary. Norway isn't dependent today on that fund. It's put in a savings account. So there's some hope that the standard of living doesn't have to immediately change, even if the income there does. But the awareness of that fund and the pressure on Norwegians to use it wisely and to use it to get out of the oil business is strong and is very strongly felt in Norway.
The Norwegian ambassador, I think we're saying, in residence here anyway, for the time being. Peter, a lot of very interesting points raised there about stakeholders and how things have to change and why they weren't changing. Would you like to address them? And then Dimitri afterwards.
Yes, I'd slightly like to take issue with what was said, actually, by the questioner in terms of profit. I think we all know that profit at the end of the day needs to happen. I think nothing happens without people making money, and that's not going to change, never. What we are doing now is recognizing that environmental and social values have been severely undervalued within our economic system, okay? And they need to be given a price, not just a price on carbon, but a price on social values and environmental values generally, need to be built into this equation in a way they haven't been before, rather like, back to my smoking agenda, smoking kills is now a big issue, and smoking kills has changed the price of cigarettes dramatically, right? Now, that's a very simple example of what we need to do for everything, for every type of resource that we use, whether it be energy resources, whether it be an increase in copper mining resulting from electrification. At the end of the day, everybody needs to take more responsibility. And what governments and regulators need to do is to take the first steps to put a value on environmental and social issues. That's what's needed.
Thank you, Peter. Dimitri, just a small question
I,
for you.
I like this question very much, and I think it's the biggest debate that we have with some of our clients. It's growth and profits. Obviously, all of them are looking for the two, and I think we have to point the fact that profitability of some business units, of some products, were potentially great, amazing, the best over the last years, over the last decades. But when you look to this business, when you look to this product line, in 2030, it's gonna be over. It's gonna be over, one, because you will have potentially some taxes, some taxes on your product because it's not a line, or either it's gonna be over because the resource that you are taking in order to make this product won't be as available as it was before. And I think it's an exercise that we are trying to do with some of our clients. It's to look to your profit, business by business, countries by countries, product line by product line, and to oppose this business with the environmental impact and how much does this business contribute positively or more negatively to the boundaries of the planet, and looking to that and being able to put, exactly like you said, being able to put a value on the environmental impact that you have with your product is super helpful in order to help them understand that profit from the past will not be potentially the profit of the profit of the future.
Did you want to say something, Kurt? Yeah.
No, I think it's inspiring to listen to those reflections, and again, the Norwegian oil industry is a good example of how it in fact does work when a government heavily regulates an industry, and they are still motivated to do that work. So we don't have to fear regulation. It's quite possible to do business in the context of heavy regulation also.
Very interesting. Right, I'm going to come back to you, sir. Would you like the microphone back? If you come on, making Richard do some work here. Here we go. The microphone's going back to our original questioner, who is going to say something now.
I'd just like to respond to those comments, and I think
please do.
One, firstly, on Norway, highly commendable that they're looking to move out of the oil and gas. And sorry, I used you as an example there. But Peter, you talk about smoking and that how smoking kills. You referred to it in your presentation. For me, if there's a product that is creating profit, that is killing people, that is heavily taxed by governments, that is reducing the burden on national health services, so people die early, so they don't pay their pensions, their state pensions, that should be illegal. Government should step in there and say, this product kills people, but the reason they don't do that is for what I just mentioned now, right? It generates massive amounts of tax revenue. It takes the burden away from governments to pay pensions, right? So this is where governments need to step in and say, is this product in the best interest of people, planet, and prosperity? You can look at fizzy drinks the same way. They kill people. They give people diabetes. They make massive profits. You invest in these companies, you're going to get great returns. There's ways of making profit that are sustainable, that generate prosperity, that help equality, and save the planet. There's so many opportunities. But what we do as a civilization now is pursue profit at the expense of all those things. And that was the point I was making. But I love the comments of all three of the panelists. And if you want to respond, I'd love to hear your response.
Well, actually, it would be interesting very briefly. Peter, would you like to say something? Are you champing at the bit there?
Yeah, well, no, I agree. I agree with a lot of what has been said, although I would say that, even today, cigarettes are not illegal. So at the end of the day, to make things illegal is an extremely difficult thing to do. And I don't know how many of you might have listened to one of the McKinsey sessions here at COP26, although I'm here in Singapore, I'm still listening to them virtually. But one of the ladies from BlackRock made an interesting comment and said, look, we're trying to basically change the energy system for an aeroplane that is running out of fuel in the middle of the ocean, that is running out of fuel and will crash, and we're trying to change the source of the fuel at the same time, and it's impossible to do everything at the same time. So at the end of the day, I think we're all in the same place. It's a matter of pace. What we need to do is take the first steps. And the first steps are putting a health warning on, which we've started to do, but we're not taxing it enough. The second step, I think, is to make sure that those that are digging this stuff out of the ground, whether it be oil and gas, whether it be copper, whether it be anything else, at the end of the day, have greater responsibility right the way through their value chains to the supplier. Because at the end of the day, I would argue that people haven't made profits only out of the extracting of the resources. They made profits because the supply chains are enormous, very long, and it's the discontinuity in the supply chains that is actually where that money is made. So actually creating more localized, more regionalized supply chain will do a lot to create a more efficient system on which profits can be built in the future.
And because this is so fascinating, I do want to let you have the chance to come back very briefly, Dimitri, and then you, Kurt, as well.
So yeah, I think well, again, when we first I don't smoke, and I have I have the chance to have most of my friends and family that don't smoke, so I'm more. And but I think it's extremely obviously it's extremely difficult, because all indicators, all economic indicators, and you start by the GDP. I mean, just if you look about how the GDP has been built, how it is built, it's by essence not taking into account any resource depletion, any impact that you could have on environment. Obviously, everybody know that, but it's still the dominant. It's still the dominant indicator that you have. I had a chance to be or to work with clients on preparing their General Assembly. 80% of the General Assembly is about indicators on their economic growth, about the profit, about the dividends for shareholders, about all of that. And what we are trying to do with them, it's not to only try to infuse in their General Assembly more extra financial indicators, but because for most of the investor, it's still new. It's ready to try to build the story, the science-based story that the company is facing now and will face tomorrow. If you look more broadly, if you look by taking into account those sustainability topics, those boundary of the planet, and if you are able to build a story which is one consistent, two true, meaning that it's based on science, based on the reality of where we are. We have very great examples of like Danone in France, like Emmanuel Faber. He succeeded to have 99% of the shareholders that accepted Danone to be a mission-driven company. 99% of them accepted that, because he succeeded to convince all of them about a new story for the next decade. So I think the effort needs to be taken at each level, and I would say at each decision, I would say at each meetings, and I would say, like, even with your coffee at the coffee machine with your colleagues, that needs to start there when we see the level of transformation that is in front of us for the next decade.
Thank you, Dimitri. Very briefly, Kurt, because I want to squeeze in one more thing before we let you all go. So,
about my students, and they're so idealistic and they're so driven, and I think that again that's a strong motivator for all sorts of changes, and even in the face of heavy regulation, the interests of young people in defining the development of their society, and not least of all their workplace, is going to be decisive here.
Well, I want to stick with you because you said something that made my ears prick up. This whole idea of industry and academia working better together. This is something I repeatedly hear, that people that are in academia have brilliant ideas, but they can't take them to market. They don't have the expertise to do it. There seems to be I don't know, no nexus or a very small nexus sometimes between industry and academia, or an understanding of each other. I'm just wondering what you think can overcome the reticence on both parts to work together. Whose fault is it that this is not happening?
Well, I think that I don't know whose fault it is so much as that we don't understand each other well. So the profit-driven timelines of industry are much shorter than the discovery-driven timelines of academia, and that's a starting point that we can't get away from. The center that I mentioned that we have at my university is in part possible because our research council said we want to fund research, but we want to force collaboration with industry, and they
force collaboration. How
right.
An interesting choice of words.
Right. So they make funding that center contingent upon partnerships with industry who are actually actively contributing to the process, and that has been used now in many different settings in Norway in a way that has successfully shortened the time from discovery to application in a quite impressive way.
Well, let me very brief comment from both of you, from Peter and then Dimitri, on that situation between industry and academia and where we can go from here.
So in my role as the regional representative of the Energy Institute here in Asia Pacific, obviously continuous professional development is a very core topic. And I'd like to just continue from where we just left off in the conversation, in that I think, and we haven't talked much about innovation and technology, but the rapid pace of change is clearly changing a model where clearly what was academia in the past is no longer fit for purpose for the careers of the future, which will require continuous development of people's careers as we go forwards. Now, where I think there is a massive gap right now is how we interface the two, between academia and energy and industry, not energy, sorry, industry generally. So to my mind, we are at the beginning of a conversation which kind of grays the boundaries. And I think the academics are recognizing they need to play in the continuous professional development sphere. And I think industry is beginning to recognize they need the academics to play that role more effectively. So to my mind, I think that conversation is starting. I think there's going to be dramatic change over the next decade, 2 decades, in terms of what an engineer looks like, what engineering qualifications look like, and they're going to be much more fit for purpose for the technologies of tomorrow.
Peter, thank you. And Dimitri, finally to you.
Yeah, quickly. So two answers. One, it's at the DNA of Quentis. We are a spin-off of different university, different academics. So it's really embedded within Quentis. And I think one of the key point of the success of Quentis is because our clients see us as making the bridge between academics and businesses. And why this bridge on sustainability is absolutely key, it's because 5 years ago, 7 years ago, it was absolutely impossible to do what we call a scope 3 evaluation, meaning to understand what is your carbon footprint on your full value chain. It was the uncertainty was between minus 40%, plus 40%. So it's because we had succeed to develop a lot of new methodologies of data sets that we succeed to make it better now. So one. And secondly, it's because academics are the one, and we have 2 key players on that, are the one that are educating the new generations about all of this topic. So we are working a lot. We are training a lot of students at Quentis in order to make them understood about what is the boundaries, what is the capacity of the planet, and what are the different methodology that we can have in order to assess the businesses on that. So I see academics as very important for the coming decades, as the one that will be able to infuse innovation, infuse more knowledge in order to better understand what is the next value proposition for the world. And secondly, it's because they are educating the new generation that needs to understand clearly how to make it with these new constraints and opportunities in mind.
Guys, I've had a blast listening to this. It's been absolutely fascinating. I'm sorry we didn't talk a little bit more about innovation, Peter, but maybe we needed another hour to keep going around all the things that we wanted to cover. Very grateful to the gentleman who posed that fascinating question, but thank you to our marvelous panel. We've dipped our toes in a huge issue. We hope you've helped to shed some light for everybody watching this. Peter, Dimitri, and Kurt, thank you so much. We're going to take a short break. Hope you can join us back here at 10. Grab a soft drink, coffee, have a chat to others. We're moving on to the role of the circular economy playing for trades and economic diversification when we return. So see you back here at 10 UK time. Thank you very much.